Silence leaves a strange mark on the human mind. A person talks less, replies slower, becomes calmer, and suddenly their presence feels heavier than before. Attention fades for a moment, yet curiosity begins to grow. Questions appear where certainty once lived. Why does this happen? Why do people sometimes think more about someone after distance appears? Why can silence make emotions louder instead of quieter? Most people think they already know the answer. They believe ignoring someone is just a game, a trick, a shortcut to attention, especially when it comes to relationships. Many believe silence is only used to make another person chase harder. But the truth is darker, deeper, and far more psychological than most people realize. Because silence does not always create attraction. Sometimes it creates distance, sometimes confusion, sometimes regret, and sometimes, without warning, it destroys trust completely. The uncomfortable truth is that many people misunderstand emotional control and confuse it with emotional manipulation. They think disappearing, acting cold, or withholding attention automatically creates value. But reality works very differently. In this video, we are going to uncover the hidden psychology behind silence and why the human mind reacts so strongly when attention suddenly changes. You will learn why emotional absence can feel powerful, why mystery sometimes creates attraction, why desperate energy quietly pushes people away, and why emotional calm often speaks louder than words. But we are also going into the darker side that few people talk about. The side where silence becomes control. The side where emotional distance turns into manipulation. The side where people weaponize attention without fully understanding the damage it creates. Because there is a line between confidence and emotional games, and most people cross that line without even noticing. You will also learn why being constantly available changes how people emotionally respond to you, why uncertainty affects emotions more than certainty, and why silence often reveals more about confidence than talking ever could. At the same time, we will uncover lesser-known psychological truths that many self-help videos ignore. Not every silence creates attraction. Not every absence increases value. Sometimes silence works because it creates emotional space. Other times it fails because it creates emotional fear. The difference matters more than most people think. By the end of this video, you will understand the real psychology of silence, the hidden emotional patterns behind attraction and attention, and why true emotional control has very little to do with pretending not to care. More importantly, you will learn the difference between becoming emotionally grounded and becoming emotionally manipulative, because one creates respect while the other slowly destroys connection. So stay with us until the end, because the final lesson changes the entire meaning of silence and explains why the strongest people are often not the loudest, not the coldest, and not the hardest to reach, but the ones who understand exactly when silence creates peace and when it quietly becomes power. Welcome to the channel, where we explore psychology, human behavior, and the hidden patterns behind attraction, emotion, and self-control. If this kind of content interests you, subscribe and join us for more deep psychological insights. Attention loses value when it becomes too easy to predict. This is one of the quiet rules of human psychology that many people never notice until they feel its effects in their own lives. A person who is always present, always available, always reacting, slowly stops creating emotional movement in the mind of another person. At first, constant attention feels exciting, fast replies feel warm, endless effort feels romantic, constant checking feels like care. But over time, something begins to change. The emotional tension starts to disappear, the mystery becomes smaller, the space where curiosity once lived slowly fades away. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. When someone becomes too predictable, the mind stops wondering. And when the mind stops wondering, emotions often lose intensity. This does not mean people stop caring. It means emotional attention starts becoming automatic, familiar, expected, and human beings rarely notice what never changes. The mind reacts to movement, to contrast, to shifts. not to things that stay exactly the same every second of every day. Think about how quickly patterns form between people. Someone sends messages all day, replies within seconds, reacts emotionally to everything, tries to impress constantly, gives attention without pause. At first, this energy can feel exciting because it creates emotional momentum. But after some time, that same energy becomes normal. The brain adjusts. What once felt special becomes expected. The emotional reaction becomes smaller because certainty becomes stronger. There is no room left for curiosity, no room left for wondering, no room left for absence to create emotional weight. This is where many people make a painful mistake. They believe more effort automatically creates more attraction, more texting, more chasing, more proving, more explaining, more emotional reaction. But psychology often moves in quieter ways. Emotional intensity does not always grow through more presence. Sometimes it changes through space, through pauses, through emotional steadiness. This does not mean disappearing to manipulate people. It does not mean becoming cold or emotionally distant. It means understanding something uncomfortable about human attention. When everything becomes constant, emotional contrast disappears. And when contrast disappears, emotional awareness often becomes weaker. A person who is always trying to impress slowly becomes predictable. Predictability removes tension. Predictability removes curiosity. The emotional mind stops asking questions because it already thinks it knows the answer. There is no mystery left to explore, no emotional movement left to notice. The strange part is that many people create this problem without realizing it. They think love means never stepping back, never slowing down, never allowing silence to exist. They panic at emotional space. They treat quiet moments like danger, so they fill every silence with words, every pause with attention, every uncertainty with reassurance. But sometimes too much presence becomes noise. Silence creates something attention cannot always create: contrast. And contrast makes people notice changes. Human beings are built to notice changes. A sudden sound in a quiet room, a shift in behavior, a difference in emotional energy. When someone who is emotionally stable becomes calmer instead of reactive, the emotional pattern changes. The mind notices the difference, not because silence is magical, not because people enjoy confusion, but because change naturally captures attention. The human brain constantly scans for shifts. It asks quiet questions without permission. Why does this feel different? What changed? What happened? This is why emotional steadiness often feels more powerful than emotional chasing. Calmness creates space. Space creates reflection. Reflection creates emotional awareness. Sometimes silence speaks because presence became too loud. And this is where many men get it wrong. They hear ideas about mystery and silence and turn them into games. They think ignoring someone automatically creates attraction. They think delayed replies are power. Coldness becomes confidence in their minds. Distance becomes strategy. Suddenly, silence stops being natural and starts becoming performance. But there is a difference between emotional control and emotional manipulation, and confusing the two quietly destroys trust. Healthy silence is calm. It is steady. It comes from emotional balance. A person with emotional control does not react to every feeling instantly. They do not panic during uncertainty. They do not chase reassurance every minute. They allow themselves space to think. They slow down before reacting emotionally. They do not rush to prove value. They do not collapse into fear because a reply takes longer than expected. They remain emotionally centered. This kind of silence feels different because it comes from peace rather than pressure. It says something simple without words. I am calm. I am steady. I do not need chaos to feel secure. Manipulative silence looks different even when it hides behind confidence. It appears calm on the outside, but fear lives underneath it. Someone stops replying to punish, withdraws attention to create anxiety, pulls away not because they need space, but because they want control. They want emotional confusion. They want the other person to feel desperate, uncertain, emotionally dependent. Silence becomes a weapon instead of space. Distance becomes punishment instead of peace. The goal quietly changes from emotional balance to emotional power. And people often feel this difference even if they cannot explain it. A calm person creates steadiness. A manipulative person creates confusion. One feels grounded, the other feels emotionally heavy. One leaves room to breathe, the other leaves fear in the room. This is why emotional control matters so much. Emotional control is strength. Emotional manipulation is insecurity wearing a mask. Someone secure does not need games to feel powerful. They do not need emotional punishment to feel important. They are not obsessed with controlling every emotional reaction around them. They understand that silence should create clarity, not confusion. Yet silence still affects emotions deeply, and this brings us into something darker and more uncomfortable. The human mind hates uncertainty. It fights against it almost automatically. When emotional patterns change, questions begin to appear. Someone becomes quieter, more emotionally steady, less reactive, less desperate for attention. The brain notices the shift and starts filling the empty space with stories. What changed? Are they upset, losing interest, thinking differently, becoming distant? The strange thing is that silence rarely speaks directly, but the mind hates leaving silence empty. It rushes to fill the gaps. This is not about women only. This is not some secret rule hidden inside attraction. It is human psychology. People react to emotional uncertainty because certainty feels safe. Predictability feels stable. The moment certainty weakens, attention increases. Not always because feelings grow stronger, but because emotional focus becomes sharper. The mind searches for answers. Emotional space becomes louder than noise. A delayed response suddenly feels important. A calmer tone feels meaningful. Small differences feel larger because uncertainty turns attention inward. The mind often chases answers more than attention. That sentence explains more about human behavior than most people realize. People are not only affected by affection, they are affected by questions. Questions create emotional energy. Uncertainty creates emotional focus. And this is where silence becomes complicated, because when used with emotional maturity, it creates calm space. But when used carelessly, it creates overthinking, anxiety, and emotional imbalance. And the difference between those two outcomes is smaller than most people think. By now, one truth should feel impossible to ignore. The real power was never about making someone miss you, never about playing games, never about disappearing just to create confusion. Real power begins the moment you stop trying to control someone else and start learning how to control yourself. Because silence on its own means nothing. Anyone can stop texting, anyone can pull away, anyone can pretend not to care, but emotional control is different. Emotional control is staying calm when emotions become messy, staying grounded when uncertainty appears, staying steady when attention changes. It is knowing your value without demanding constant reassurance. It is refusing to chase while also refusing to punish. The people who leave the deepest impression are rarely the loudest people in the room. They are not desperate for attention. They are not forcing connection. They are not reacting to every emotion like a storm. They move with quiet confidence, calm energy, quiet strength. And strangely enough, that calm often says more than words ever could, because people remember how someone made them feel, and emotional steadiness leaves a mark that noise never can. So before you mistake silence for power, ask yourself one question. Is your silence creating peace or creating pain? Is it coming from confidence or fear, from self-respect or control? Because the strongest silence is not cold, it is clear, it is calm, it is intentional, and the moment silence stops being a weapon and becomes self-control, everything changes. If this video helped you see psychology, attraction, and emotional control in a different way, Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss future videos like this. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Because sometimes, the smallest psychological truths quietly change the way we understand people forever. Silence becomes powerful the moment it stops being a weapon and becomes self-control.